president of the Springfield branch NAACP and also the state president for all NAACP branches throughout Illinois. We welcome you here tonight. Tonight's focus is to continue the conversation that we started a year ago after the Ferguson situation. Now, in light of the video being released in Chicago, we thought it was important to bring everyone together again tonight to talk about some of those issues and how we can continue to bridge the gap here in the Springfield community. Yes, we've had open dialogue since the Ferguson situation, and we have made improvements, but we still have a long way to go. So hopefully tonight we want you to participate. We're going to do introductions and give a quick overview of who's on the panel and why we're here tonight, and then we're going to open it up to the floor for you to step up to the mic and ask the questions that you want to ask of the panel tonight. Again, thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to our mayor.
Thank you, Teresa. I'd like to personally thank the NAACP, especially under Teresa Haley's leadership. Previously, when a year ago I was city treasurer and was sitting in the audience, and by the grace of God, now I'm sitting out front. But it's due to the leadership of community activists like Teresa Haley that puts on the forefront difficult issues to discuss. And it's more importantly, as she pointed out, is we have to get past the discussion phase with regards to growing our community, making it the best community that each and every one of us would like. So as mayor, one of the things that we need to do, my dad was mayor, and I'm just going to speak from the heart. One thing that he always emphasized, you have to learn from your history. And even though an event happens elsewhere, like Chicago, like Ferguson, what we need to do is learn from those events and take proactive measures so it doesn't happen here. And that's what we're doing here tonight. So one thing that has happened is a lot of gun violence recently. And it was just a couple of weekends ago, I shared it with Alderman Senior, who's here tonight, and I appreciate his leadership on the council. It broke my heart because they were interviewing a gentleman that might have had information to help solve that particular shooting, but he was afraid to come forward because he wanted to protect his family. And being the mayor of the capital city in Illinois, of Springfield, each and every family should feel safe. So if one of us is suffering, we all suffer. And that's the direction we're taking as a community. I've been mayor for 8 months. We're changing the culture of the community. We have a great police chief, and that was due to a lot of input from the public. We had public forums to help with that vetting process, and we ended up retaining Chief Kenny Winslow, and he's very proactive in the community. And the #1 job for the police department, as with the city, is to protect and serve the public. Each and every department of the city is here to serve the public. And that's what this open dialogue helps, is in with regards to that. And we've had ward meetings now, but we want to keep that dialogue open, the open lines of communication. But first and foremost, we want to take that step beyond that. We want to identify it in a civil manner, how we want to see Springfield in the future, and we need to take the progressive steps moving forward to address the issues so each and every one of us feels safe. Each and every one has a good job to help their families, provide shelter, provide food. That's the basic essentials of human life. And that's the Springfield that we will have forthcoming, and we'll all work towards that. So we appreciate you taking the leadership role and moving in the positive direction of discussing these difficult issues.
Thank you. Chief Winslow?
Thank you, Teresa. Again, just want to welcome everybody tonight. Thanks for having us out. Obviously, the reason we're here tonight is to discuss law enforcement, the stage of law enforcement today in our country, and talk about the state of law enforcement here in Springfield. With that, as a police department, we're concerned by some of the things that we've seen too, and we're trying to, every time there's an incident, we do what we call a crisis analysis of that incident, so we don't repeat that history or that mistake that some other department made. So what we don't want to happen is things like South Carolina, Chicago, to stop the progress we've made in the last year. So I look forward to the dialogue tonight and continue to move forward.
Superintendent?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Gill, Superintendent of Schools here in Springfield, and like the mayor said, we want each and every student to feel safe when they come into our schools each and every day. So we work alongside Chief Winslow with our student resource officers in our schools to build relationships with students. That's something that, because of the history we've had over the past 2 years, we've put back into our schools after some budget cuts. We felt it's very important to have the police officers that are in our school be there on a day-to-day basis to get to know our students and build relationships, and we think that that's going to lead us in the right direction. And we talk frequently when we're having concerns, not only within our schools but in the community, to really take and address these things head on so that we can help our students be successful and do the thing that they need to do each day, and that's come to learn and graduate from school and have a path for their post-high school career. So thank you for having me tonight, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Moore?
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Robert Moore. I guess, may I announce my new role? Yes, sir. I have accepted a invitation from the new state chair to be the chairman of the new Criminal Justice Committee for the NAACP. So I'm very pleased to be able to work with the NAACP on that. I'm a lifetime member of the NAACP, and so been involved with them all. But I'm also a community, I like to consider myself as a community police consultant. And we have been working with the mayor for quite a while here. But we want to start to look at some problems that affects the community and the police. We really haven't identified those problems fully. We know, we hear things, we see things, but we haven't identified the problems that affect us right here in Springfield and put them in writing. We've got to do that. We've got to put them in writing and then work on them one at a time. We got to get some of them off the board. We just simply have to. We can't continue to have the same problem that we're facing and we never come up with a solution. We've got to do that. And so hopefully that we will start to identify the problems that affect, and I'm going to say between the black community and the police department. And I say that because we have the problems that we're seeing right now is because of white police officers and black men not knowing, having some issues that's causing all these meetings to occur across the nation. And we've got to address that. We simply can't push it under the rug any longer. We got to get to the heart of the issue.
Thank you. Mr. Rose?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Justin Rose, and I'm here from the University of Illinois at Springfield. I work in the Division of Student Affairs, primarily in the Diversity Center. The reason why I'm here, Teresa Haley reached out to me because of the importance that I have in higher education and dealing with many of the students of these parents who, you know, for the student who's lucky enough to make it to that arena, still being able to educate them about how to purport themselves in a proper manner when dealing with law enforcement, when dealing with other public administrators or government officials. You need to teach them certain things, and it's my job to do that in the Diversity Center and the Division of Student Affairs, and I take pride in that. I take pride in being able to work with the students who are at our institution and getting out in the community and doing grassroots, you know, change agent work for many traditionally underrepresented populations. So I thank Teresa for having me here, but I want to follow up with Bob Moore's comment, which is how many times is too many times to be having these meetings? I mean, we all know what the problems are, but I think we need to move towards more solutions, and I think this is the space to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. First question. What can we do to prevent a Chicago situation from occurring here in Springfield? Let's turn it over to the mayor first. This is your city.
Well, I think Robert Moore touched on it. others, but what impacts all communities is any incident with the police department. It's like a domino effect. It doesn't matter what city it happens in, everybody can relate to it happening in their community. So how do we prevent it from happening? You have to learn from other events, so you have to be proactive and develop those relationships. I know people say they're tired of meetings. We had ward plan meetings for each ward, and the attendance there was great. We had representatives from the public share their ideas and viewpoints of what are issues in their particular area or as the city as a whole. And those are different from Jim Langfelder's, they're different from the chief's, and that's why you have to keep the dialogue open so we know what concerns each and every resident. Going back to the example I gave about having a safe community, the individual feels unsafe reporting information. So what we have to do is figure out a mechanism that they feel comfortable. If they're not comfortable coming to the police department, we have to figure if they're comfortable going to the alderman, going to their pastor, going to some other avenue, so we can have that greater comfort level where you build the trust in the community. And I think these dialogues are actually important. I think that's why you've seen no occurrences like Ferguson. The chief can speak to what the police department has done over the years, but from my perspective, it's good to have these open dialogue discussions so we can address the issues and not just come back a year from now and discuss the same issues. We want to be proactive, and that's what we intend to do with the ward plans, is we can address the issues and come back 6 months from now and say, here's what we've identified, here's how we addressed it, and move forward in a progressive manner so we can grow from the point we are here today.
Okay, Chief, same question. What can we do to prevent a Chicago situation occurring here in Springfield?
Well, obviously what you have in Chicago, in my opinion, has been a total system failure. You had the officer-involved shooting for one, but then you had all of the elapsed time before things were brought to the public. In order to do that, you have to, it starts with the whole system, the whole department. There has to be a culture of accountability and doing the right thing. You have to recruit people, the best people you can, and they have to be people of high moral character and high moral values. You have to have integrity. You can't teach integrity. If somebody comes to the door without integrity, you're going down the wrong road already. With that, you have to provide appropriate training for your officers. You have to provide them the tools that are needed to deal with situations such as somebody who's possibly armed with a knife. I think everybody in here, safely I can say, was troubled when they saw that video. The first thought that came to my mind and my staff as we watched it together when it was announced was, where was the less lethal options for these officers? Where was the taser? Where was the blue gun? We were shocked by what we saw and disturbed. With that said, the gentleman's being held accountable, at least at now, and now we have to let the system run its course. We have to see what happens. He'll be judged by a jury of his peers and go forward. But no way in the world would, and I'm going to speak for the mayor, hopefully he doesn't get mad, but no way in the world would we let something like that drag on for a year. And I don't think John Milheiser, who's not here, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, would ever do that as well. So part of the issue, I think, that allowed that to happen in Chicago was the fact that they didn't call an outside agency to investigate their officer-involved shootings. That's a practice we've been doing for many, many years. You have to have that outside person come in and do the investigation, just for the sake of perception, in my opinion, and the integrity of the investigation. And that's a practice that most departments have done for several years, and I know there's some departments around the state and around the country that still do their own, but that'll all change with the new Police Community Improvement Act that goes into effect January 1st. So when you look at that, again, it's a total failure in the system, in my opinion, from the mayor all the way down. So everybody needs to be held accountable that was involved in that situation, and that wouldn't happen here.
Thank you.
That's the mayor of Chicago.
Culture of the department dictates what we believe in. The culture of any organization dictates what we believe in. In Chicago, they allowed police officers to shoot people and not be held accountable. So that's what they believed in. Those police officers believed that they could shoot people and get away with it because of the fact that the administration didn't demand that there was accountability. So culture, we have to, right here in our own backyard, we have to identify the culture within our own police department. We have to evaluate it, and when we find something that's lacking, we have to get some goals and objectives to get it back on track. Ferguson, their culture contributed to that situation there. In fact, if I would go so far to say that the last situation where they had was taxing the poor people through fines instead of through the court, they created that condition. They created that culture. Not only created it, but they nurtured it. They nurtured that. And you saw what the results were. The same results in Chicago. And the same thing will happen right here if we allow that type of culture to invade our police department.
Thank you. I have a stats. I talked with someone in Chicago today, and they said from 2007 until 2015, over 400 black men were shot by police and only 2 were charged. Stats. That's really unfortunate. Superintendent, what can we do in our schools to help our students after they see a video like this?
Well, I think it's important to allow them to have open dialogue if they wish to talk about it. And once again, we hope that they feel safe in coming forward in a school setting to share any information they have or any concerns that they may have in regards to their safety or knowledge about something else that's going to happen in the community. As the mayor stated before, we don't want that culture to be that they are fearful of being able to come forward and share information. One thing that we've been doing with Officer Badger on the Springfield Police Force is creating a Crime Stopper opportunity so that students can come forward in an anonymous way, but yet that information will get back to the right officials and authorities so that we can deal with things in our community as well as in our schools. But more importantly, we're just working to make sure that we know on the school district staff how to de-escalate situations, not only with our SRO officers, but also our civilian security and our teaching staff and all of those that support the students each and every day. So once again, allowing them to have that open dialogue, but also allowing them to feel safe in our environments to come and talk about these topics.
Thank you. Justin, what about at the university? What are you doing and what have you done?
Excuse me. At the university level, it's much of what Superintendent Gill said, that we have to create those forums and opportunities where uncomfortable conversation can occur, that dialogue can happen. Just as important, making sure that staff, faculty, they understand the things that's being disseminated in the media isn't always reality. You know, bad news travels fast, right? We know that. So we need to do our part as a community, a campus community, to get out there and change the perception that's occurring. But that can only happen if we have the forums appropriate to have the dialogue, to actively listen to one another, or to build that community where our students feel safe enough to get out in the community and make change. So that's one way.
Thank you. Let's talk about body cameras. After Ferguson, we had some conversation about body cameras, and the NAACP is in support of body cameras. But what we saw with the tapes in Chicago, video didn't make a difference. So, Chief, talk to us about body cameras.
Obviously, with body cameras, we think they provide a value to the department and to the community. We think it's going to help increase transparency. We think it'll change behavior or modify behavior. But again, it's just another tool to help paint a picture. It's not an exact replication of what happened in somebody's perception. We all know that, like you say, an officer-involved shooting, certain physiological effects affect the body. And so an officer's perception may be one thing, while the camera picks something else up. Also, the camera sees better than the human eye sees, so that's another thing you have to consider. But overall, we think these are something that will be valuable to the department, to the community. It's something we want to look at. Obviously, we think there's some changes in the law that need to be made, but it's something we've been piloting for the last 5 weeks. In fact, if anybody wants to see one, Deputy Chief Stokes brought one with us tonight. You can take a peek at it before we leave here. We think it's a valuable tool. It's going to be very, very expensive for the community to go to these, and I don't want to give an exact amount out because, again, we're going to put it out for RFP and try to get the best deal we can for the community. But it's something that I see us going to. I see everybody in law enforcement eventually going to it. This technology is not going to go away. So as I've told other chiefs and I had that conversation, it's something that we have to work through. And we believe that the law that is in place that goes into effect January 1st is a good beginning. And there's nothing there that we can't overcome with some help from some legislators. So we look forward to that. And obviously we're going to call on Teresa and NAACP to also try to champion this cause. Because I'll tell you, I've been to several meetings and training seminars in the last couple months talking about body cameras, and there's not a whole lot of hands going up about who's interested in going to body cameras right now. Now, prior to them putting this law out, there was a lot of hands in the room that people were considering. But since that time, I can tell you I was just recently at a training course down in Fairview Heights, and I was the only one that said our department was piloting body cameras or considering going to a program. So again, I think a lot of chiefs out there want to embrace this technology. It's very expensive, so we have to find a way to pay for it. And in addition to that, there's some things in the law that makes it cumbersome and that's unclear. So, but it's nothing we can't work through. And so I look forward to trying to work through that. And obviously, it's something that the Springfield Police Department will evaluate upon our pilot being done, and I believe we'll end up moving forward with it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
One, I want to go back to the previous question real quick with regards to what we can do as a community. That's the difference between perception and reality. And if there's perception out there for certain individuals with regards to law enforcement or the community, we need to change that perception. If it's reality and it's something unjust, we need to correct it, and I think that's what Bob Moore had said. With regards to body cameras, I'm all in favor of body cameras. I think it helps not only the individual public, but also the police department. It does tell that picture. And where the NAACP can help, as well as other organizations, is be sure to put the pressure on the legislative bodies, because what we want is something that's workable for the public in keeping everybody safe. That's from law enforcement to the general public. It's all about safety, and that's what we want to do. We want to make sure it doesn't get caught up in the bureaucracy with regards to FOIA requests. The chief had told the city council the other day that the FOIA requests are going to be extreme compared to the dash cameras. So we need to have ease of process, because we can't lose sight of the importance of body cameras, and that is to keep everybody safe.
More?
We have to learn. Once again, someone said we have to learn from our mistakes. And we've had body cameras. We can remember the incidents in California where we had body cams, video of Rodney King. We remember that. We remember the New York situation. And recently we remember Chicago. Chicago going to keep coming up, where the audio was turned off. And I'm well aware of some things that went on in Mississippi. The cameras, they turned them off. Officers turned them off. So if you don't have good policy that has teeth in them, that is going to stop these officers from doing what they want to do when they want to do them with these particular tools that you're giving them. And the tools are costly. It's costing the taxpayers money. But if you can't have them, if the officers are going to turn them off, you might as well not have them. And those are some things that's happening across this nation. And I'll share one in Columbus, Mississippi. The officer there turned his off, but he's no longer working. They fired him. So that's the type of situation that's got to be done in these departments, where you got these resources to have, but when they're violated, you got to have some teeth in them, because if you don't put some teeth in it, you might as well not have them.
Thank you. Chief, you have other comments?
Yeah, I just want to add, with the technology, it fails. Bob brought up a great point that they have to follow your policy. Your policy has to have teeth in it, and you have to hold people accountable. But if anybody thinks that technology is not going to fail, how many times does your computer crash? How many times does your phone don't work? It's going to crash. Every piece of technology we have fails. But ultimately, you know, you look at Chicago, you have 4 in-car camera systems, and none of the audio works. It brings up some questions there that, red flags. But, you know, we've had audio fail in our in-car camera systems. There is no perfect system out there. Technology will fail, and the public needs to realize that as we work forward, that, you know, you have to hold people accountable, but there has to be the expectation that this is, again, is just another tool to help paint the picture, and that there will be a time when the technology is going to fail. But you got to have, like Bob said, a culture of accountability. So if somebody's doing something inappropriate, that you're going to hold them accountable and deal with that.
Thank you.
Real quick, if I could, this goes from learning from others' mishaps, and it's Chicago. There's an editorial in today's State Journal Register, and it stated that they compared the police reports with the video and they didn't match up. So anytime there's an incident with regards to police shooting, that would be the first thing you would do, is compare the report with the video camera. And it shouldn't be a year after the fact, after the public outcry. It should be regular protocol. And I have my full faith and confidence in not only the Chief Winslow, but also the Springfield Police Department to do what's right. But when you have unfortunate situations or tragic situations like that, you have to go back, take a look at what's transpired, and see, making sure everything matches up.
Justin, as a black male out at the university, would you feel safer with a police officer approaching you with the camera on or not having a camera at all?
Definitely with the camera. Again, everybody's on the panel said it. I mean, sometimes the camera picks up more than what the naked eye can pick up, and it just adds validity to anything that I might have to contest on a hearsay basis. I mean, but again, making sure that it's teeth to it that would have me more at ease. So basically clearing up that reality versus perception piece. I mean, I may see an officer with the body camera on, but I need to know things are being enforced. If audio goes off, then you know what other things are in place to help, you know, remedy that situation. So I mean, definitely transparency is everything, and if we can get to that as public administrators and having body cameras where we know they're functioning, and in the case that a malfunction occurs, I know what's going to happen next, that would also put me at ease. So not just having on a device, but me being knowledgeable enough to know next steps if things malfunction or fail. So,
Superintendent, what can we do in our school systems to let our students know that cops are good people? They're not bad people.
Well, I think the first step has been, Chief Winslow has been very open to coming into the schools and talking not only with my staff, but also with the principals, the administration at the schools, and with our student resource officers. I think most importantly, it's teaching and having that culture of respect in our schools and teaching the expectations we have. My board members alongside me listen to a lot of stories about students who are bringing knives or bringing weapons into our schools or having concerns, and it's not because of something they're worried about during the school day, but something that they're worried about to and from coming home and neighborhood problems that they're facing. So when we can work with students and make it a safe and opening environment with which to share what's going on in their lives, then they're going to feel better about coming to school on a regular basis and making sure that they have a place where they can go for help if they need that assistance. We're losing too many students every year to Department of Correction assignments or having to go to alternative programs. We want to have a culture where students are engaged in our schools, they feel respected by my staff and the administration at the schools, and that it's a two-way street, that we have a culture of expectations for how to behave and work alongside each other during the school day. And I think in concert with the Springfield Police Department, having that open dialogue is going to help us, and we can share and talk about things that are going on in our community, because oftentimes the community comes into our schools and we're trying to deal with it and understand it, and we need to make sure that we're taking the steps to have those conversations on a daily basis.
Thank you. This goes to Chief Winslow and also Superintendent. What can we do in the police department, fire department, and even the school district to improve minority recruitment and retention, especially with black teachers? When situations like this occur throughout our cities, our children need to see people who look like them, that they feel comfortable approaching and talking to.
We've made some concerted effort in that decision, in that policy this year. We have a minority recruiter that works endlessly to go out to our school and our college fairs to recruit minority staff, as well as staff in hard-to-staff positions each and every year. This year we had a class of 25 minority teachers that were recruited, and that's our top class in the past few years. We're proud of that. We continue to seek information from colleges about those who may want to move to Springfield. In fact, I was just at Hazeldale Elementary this morning and had a group of community leaders alongside me, and we were introduced to one of our new recruits this past year, and she's excited to be here, and she came from Kentucky, and she wants to stay, and we're excited to have her on our staff. So I think, once again, it takes a community effort to do that recruiting. Once they're here, we need to make sure that they're active in our community and that our community supports them and they feel comfortable here and want to stay and live in the Springfield area.
Thank you. Chief?
Obviously, we've really stepped up our recruiting efforts over the last couple of years, and events like what happened in Chicago, especially when it comes to minority recruiting, has an impact on it, and that's a battle that we are facing. We can't ignore that, but what we have to do is basically talk to, especially when we talk about minority recruiting, our minority, and let them know how valuable a career in law enforcement can be, what the opportunities are there, how to go about applying for, what are some of the things you need to, some of the pitfalls you need to avoid. What does the application process and testing process entail? This isn't a job you just fill out an application, next week we're hiring. That's not how it works. It's a very long process. It's about a 6-month process to go through the testing process and actually get hired. It's very detailed. It starts off with a physical test, moves to a written test, moves to a oral examination in front of a board, and then it moves on to a chief's interview. Then it goes to a background check, a psychological, a medical. It's very, very long and tedious and detailed. But these positions are it's so important to get the right people in these positions that it has to be that process. It has to be. I hear people all the time talk about we don't like bad cops. Well, the best way not to have bad cops is not to let them in the front door. So with that, it's very detailed. We've partnered with Noble, His Law, the NAACP, faith-based organizations to increase our recruiting. Last year, we partnered with the unemployment offices throughout the states of Illinois and Missouri last year to try to increase our recruiting. We do the typical every college, every military base. What we've learned is that our best recruiters are our officers. Each one of us, including myself, need to be a recruiter. That one-on-one contact with those individuals are typically what bring our best people through the doors. And we need to continue that. You know, something we implemented as part of target recruiting was when somebody signs up for initial interest in the letter or a job, we track all that. We then send the application package out when it's time to do that. Then we followed up with a personal phone call of whoever recruited that person. We have a team of recruiters that go out to various events throughout the community, not just the schools, the colleges, but we try to hit, you know, like the Bridging the Gap barbecues, the Juneteenth celebrations, those kind of things. And I actually had talked to Teresa earlier today about even doing a law enforcement specific, and when I say law enforcement, SPD, sorry to the county, everybody else, but SPD and the NAACP to try to come up with a recruiting for specifically African Americans. And those are the kind of things we're trying to do, think outside the box. But each one of us have to be a recruiter. I'll tell you, recruiting and law enforcement, the two things that we look for, again, are, you know, people of high moral values and characters. You have to have a clean background, or relatively clean. We're not looking for perfect people. You can have a mistake or a blemish here and there, but you can't have a pattern of blemishes. We're looking for people who have a good work ethic. We'll teach you everything else you need to know if you come to the door with that. But again, you know, it's not an easy sell. It's not. I tell you, our minority officers, and I know Noble's talked to all my minority officers in the past, it's difficult for them. It's difficult for them to police in our community sometimes. And I don't want to get into all that, but, you know, there's certain challenges they face that some of my Caucasian officers do not face in our community. So, again, we just got to keep trying. We got to keep trying. We have to educate people on the opportunities that are there. It's a great career. And, you know, it's really not a career, it's a lifestyle, to be honest with you. You're never off duty. You have to live this. And, you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but we have to get where this is accepted and encouraged in the minority community as an occupation to go in. And that's one of the battles we face. So, and things like that happen in Chicago, first are not helping our cause.
Okay, I have a question for the mayor. Mr. Mayor, you received a lot of flack for not hiring any blacks in top leadership position. What are you doing to improve your minority recruitment and retention?
Well, I appreciate the question. The flack came early in my administration. My vetting process, as you might be aware of, is I met with the previous directors or the chief of police or fire department and made my choices to select individuals that shared my philosophies or weren't afraid to speak up. Because I've been watching city government since 1979. There's been minority issues. When my dad served as mayor, I was in banking when they had the Achieving the Dream luncheon that was sponsored by the bank I was at, and it was a report that came up with regards to minority hiring in Springfield. That was back in the early 90s. And guess what we're talking about? Nearly 20 years later, the same thing. Things have not progressed. So after watching government for that long a period of time, the general public put me in this position to be mayor, and what I'm here to do is change the process that we have in city government. Bob Moore talked about culture. That's what we're trying to do, is change the culture of city government, so it doesn't matter if Jim Langfelder's sitting in the mayor's chair, whoever's sitting in the mayor's chair, we have processes in place that are successful. So what have we done? Well, one is I hired Karen Davis as my economic development director. That's the first minority hire plus a female in that position as economic development director. But I selected her because she was the best qualified person that could help with economic development initiatives where we need it most, in the most dilapidated areas of Springfield. I knew her in the banking area, and that's why I brought her on. But again, because she was the right person for the job. And that's how I viewed my upper level management with regards to that. I was the first one to hire a Hispanic in the community relations. And I caught flack for that, but here's a Hispanic individual. He's well known in the community, and I haven't heard any complaints about that. The individual there, Sandy Robinson, I moved him to the purchasing or the procurement area because that was an issue with regards to vendor minority applicants. You know, I've heard that being an issue. So I moved him there because he brings that expertise. So really you take a look at the whole team approach. But with regards to regular hiring in the Springfield city government, we put in place a second review process. It's real simple. I used to be in community reinvestment with the banking service as well as Karen Davis, and we put in a second review process with regards to loan applications to make sure there was not discrimination with regards to minority loans. So we're doing the same thing on the employment side. So what happens when an application comes forward, the interview committee ranks the top 3 or 4. Then we have a second review of those applicants and to make sure that nothing fell through the cracks with regards to having the best qualified person come through. And that's met with some success. I mean, there's individual minorities that have been hired, not because they're minorities, it's because they were the qualified ones. I had one that's a chemist out at CWLP. That's one of the biggest complaints we heard when I was city treasurer. And the individual was overlooked. The second review process made sure that we vetted it, and she had a master's degree. She worked at the EPA. She was the most qualified person, and she ended up getting the position because of her qualifications. It was a bonus that she was a minority, but if we did not have that second review process in place, she would have fell through the cracks. The other thing we're doing is the outreach efforts. The chief had pointed out a lot of the ones he's involved with. The one we did recently was with the Boys and Girls Club. They have a great computer lab there, so we put out an outreach effort to teach people how they can apply online. I'm a paper-to-pen person, or a pen-to-paper person, I should say. But today you have to file an application to apply for a job for city government online, so we use that avenue to teach individuals how to apply online. We had representatives there that could answer any questions. I know the police department, fire department, and others were there to talk about career opportunities with regards to that. And one thing that the chief touched on lightly was the career center out of the vocational center. And we had probably over nearly 50 people there had an interest in law enforcement, and that's where you need to get them when they're interested and show them the direction we want to take or the road they need to take or classes they need to take to become better applicants in that process.
Bob Moore?
Yes. Which one you want me to answer?
Talk a little bit about what we can do in the Springfield community to improve retention and recruitment.
Well, I'm going to take a page out of Donald Trump's book.
Oh.
I think we ought to scrap the whole darn system and start over. I'm serious, because the fact that we are entered into a community policing phase where we say that we want input from the community. And the systems that we've had in place have been in place forever that had no input from the community. I think it's time for us to take a strong look at the selection processes. All that matters in terms of whether you get through the system or not. Our system right now, and I'm totally familiar with the system. Let me back up a little. I don't think our recruitment is a problem, because we get people to the door, but we can't get them too much farther than that. And that comes into recruiting and selection. But I really think that we've got to start looking at, get some more input from the community on what police officers really do and what we really want in our police officers. And I say that because we've got so many police officers going bad. So our system is not weeding them all out. It's simply not. It's not weeding out the bad ones all the time. It's not. So with that said, I think we need to take a new look at the selection processes and see what the community, what input that the community can give, along with the Civil Service Commission. We've got a disjointed system. We have a simply disjointed system. The Civil Service Commission never get to hear these issues. They select the officers, they make the final decision on who comes aboard, but they're never here in community meetings to listen to what's going on and what the community concerns are. So I think we really need to take a strong look at a new system.
Okay. Mr. Rose, out at the university, what would you recommend in terms of encouraging blacks and other minorities to go into becoming police officers or city government?
Very important. It's a message that we, in my office, that we tell our students to make sure that we talk about this change that you want to see, right? But we empower the students to say, if you want to see that change, actually get in those occupations. If you're a criminal justice major, make sure you do the proper things to make, move up the ranks, acquire the proper education. So just empowering our students to be able to eventually take these jobs that they see a lot of discrepancies with, be able to become judges, prosecutors, officers, anything that's going to help remedy the issues that they're currently facing. That's the only way we'll be able to change the narrative. And then just going back to our communities, oftentimes we don't go back home. We don't go back to the community and preach the good word, pontificate, as I like to say, about how important it is to, go down the right path. If school isn't for you, then find a trade. Find something constructive that'll take you out of this black market activity, because having a crab in a bucket mentality only adds to other individuals, government officials, to overlook certain issues that may affect this whole Black Lives Matter movement and derail and distract the attention. So, just going back home and empowering every underrepresented individual that what you're doing is conducive and constructive to some extent. But I guess it's just empowering the student, empowering the community members who may be in desolate, isolated situations. So.
Superintendent Gill, how are we empowering our students within our school district?
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is making sure that we have engaging learning opportunities in our classrooms every day. How our teachers can provide those opportunities for them to explore the things that they want to explore and to be allowed to be engaged in their own learning process and gradually release that process to the students so they can demonstrate their understanding and their knowledge in ways that are creative and give them opportunity to speak their voice. This is a hard process. It's not something that we do overnight, but we really have tried to start the process of moving away from just learning in the classroom, maybe the way each of us were raised, but giving them experiences in our community and experiences in the ways that they are able to engage with technology and engage with the real world. One of the things that the mayor and I have talked about quite a bit is exploring how we can begin to talk about the careers that are in city government right here in our own community that is so based on government, not only at the city level but the state level. How can we have conversations with our students not only about the type of government that you see during a city council meeting, but also the type of work that's out at CWLP with the engineering realm and the work that's with the street department and all of the different job opportunities that we have in our community to empower them to have a sense of individual determination. Where do I want to go when I graduate? What can I do to make myself get in the right situation so that I can apply for those jobs, much like you were talking about, Chief Winslow? What career path do I want to take, and what are the steps that I'm going to need to get there? And really having those conversations with individual students. Making the grade conversations at each of our high schools have helped us make sure that students are staying on track with their grades, but it starts really at the earliest level of learning. How can we set that feeling for individual determination, that I have control of my next steps in my school career? What am I going to do in the next grade level? What am I going to do in the next school that I go to? And what are those steps that I want to take in my career and path after I graduate?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
It's important that we all work together. That's one thing that we need to always look at is the processes that we have in place now. But working with School District 186, that's something we did when I was in banking, and that's something that we want to do is to show what career opportunities individuals have within city government, but also in other areas of our community. And it's important that we come together as a community, as one community, because each one of us up here, we don't have the answers. Collectively, we do have the answers, and that's why it's important to have these open discussions and dialogues so we can come up with good solutions and not stray away from the issues that could pop up. So it's important that we are being proactive like tonight and addressing those issues. So we appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. The mayor is going to have to leave, but does anybody have any questions from the audience for the mayor before he takes off? Please step to the mic.
It's a pleasure to be able to question such a distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. My name is Tom Schaefer at 2179 South 11th Street. I worked with a previous alderman for years and years to try to get the Civilian Review Commission in Springfield, and I see what happened in Chicago. Besides, I think, an obvious cover-up of a dreadful incident, the Civilian Review Commission had broken down. It became non-functional. It became a joke, a laughing stock. And I would urge the mayor who appoints the people that are on the Springfield Police Civilian Review Commission to get quality people on there. I think that if we have an incident that's questionable, could go one way or another, or is blatant, or any incident that the public has concerns about, that we could catch that at the civilian review level. I think that Chicago wished that their civilian review would have worked now, because it's put them as a great concern to the federal government and the rest of the country. And I would urge the mayor to strengthen, to resurrect the Springfield Civilian Review Commission. I've never heard how many cases they've done. I couldn't name you one person that's on it. And I worked for years, along with Frank McNeil, to try to bring it into existence. And I know that they languish in obscurity. I know that they're not paid. I know that it's a thankless job, kind of like being the superintendent of schools. But when you need them desperately. And they can save your community from the nightmare that Chicago is undergoing right now. And that's why I thought Frank was a brilliant alderman, to bring that about, that other communities have had it, and I think it has helped other communities. And I also, at this time, after that comment for the mayor, I wanted to thank the police chief for doing his due diligence on a new law of officer-worn cameras. It's complex, it's rigorous, it holds the department to a high standard, and it's expensive. but I would hope that the police union would lobby the lawmakers along with the general public to make the needed fixes for those cameras. I would hope that the officers, and I want to thank the officers that are here tonight and for the work they do for our community, that none of my comments are meant to disparage law enforcement or the officers who do law enforcement in any way. We need them every day. And the officer-worn cameras, I think if we do it correctly, the law doesn't go into effect till January. So we still have a little bit of time. If the law needs tweaked, we should lobby for that. But I think it'll be at least a tangible benefit in this digital videotape age that we can restore some kind of trust, not only to show the public is acting the fool. Occasionally an officer makes an unwise decision. This is a balance, and that if we can show this, that everybody's doing the best they can, and that there's not an obvious cover-up, and that there is no civilian review when there is a dreadful incident, it'll do something to restore the trust and to hopefully not have it happen in our community that's roiled these other communities like New York, like Missouri, like Chicago. Thank you very much. It's a distinguished panel. It's been a pleasure tonight.
Thank you, Tom, for that question. One thing you pointed out, which was real important, is even though we have, the open discussion, it can, hurt sometimes, the constructive criticism, but it's important because we're doing it with mutual respect. And that's what it's all about, is having mutual respect across the community. That way we can grow together. But with regards to the Police Review Commission, I remember that. That's when my dad was a mayor, I believe, when that was developed. And unfortunately, it hasn't progressed like it should have, so that's something we're going to take a look at. We're struggling as City Council with the Inspector General. It's the same thing, it's the same process, and what we want is individuals, if they identify issues, what's the avenue for them to feel comfortable in identifying that issue and passing the information along. And it's important for us to vet it. Is it valid or is it perception? If it's perception, we have to change that perception. If it's reality, we have to address that issue. So we have to take those proactive steps to make sure that everybody has the avenue to express those issues or concerns, and then we have to act upon them to make sure that we change the perception or address the reality of the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for hearing me. Thank you, panel. My name is Kelvin Culver. I'm 1231 North Rutledge on the north side here. I just got two comments, and then I have a question really just for the entire panel. I just want to set up this by being objective versus subjective. We just talked about Chicago stats, and I'm a very objective man. I would like to see Springfield stats. I would like to know when the last time a Springfield officer shot a black man. I would like to know where Springfield officers are performing. Because if we just gave a stat here, 486 people in Chicago or shootings, only 2 was charged, but that was subjective. I need more details. We need to get into what is the use of force? What is the definition of the use of force? Because on one side, we're tying our officers' hand because we're paintbrushing them with Chicago statistics. And then on the other side, we say, hey, come join the force, and what can we do? Nobody's walking into a political game, okay? The second thing I have to say is when we start talking about panels, okay, and being objective, we as a community have to decide what is our responsibility to get a clean definition of the use of force. Put the knife down. I agree 16 shots was extreme, but I do agree that 2 was enough. There was a knife and there was a use of force issue. So how do we as a community come together to, 1, examine the law to get ourselves educated, and 2, not only give a credit to the good police, but also recruit in an environment that says it's not going to be tainted every time somebody show a picture of a black dude getting shot. See, we are a community. We are Springfield, 116,250 people. We have a poverty level, 23,000 people in poverty. Our median income is $46,000. We are #1 in education attainment, 116 people with 5 colleges. I feel our community have ignored our scholars. We need more liaison with Mr. Rose and Dr. Ford. I'm holding an MBA, but you don't contact me. You contact people holding signs. We as a community need to come together, find our core competency, and then come together to have a very objective, reasonable approach to addressing issues. So I would like the entire panel to kind of say, how do we, 1, hold the officers accountable, but what measures will we take to recruit community and hold accountability towards our community? Thank you.
The way we define use of force is anything above normal handcuffing. Last year, that 2014, because we're not doing 2015, I believe was 708 incidents out of 123,000 calls for service, less than 0.5% of any time we have use of force. In addition to that, the last officer-involved shooting was February 21st, 2014. I remember that distinctly because the day I was named permanent chief, or the day after. And then we shot an African-American who attacked an officer and had brutally raped a woman who's now doing 30-plus years in prison. We've had, unfortunately, the last thing you ever want to do is use deadly force. Ever. No officer gets into this field to use deadly force. We get into this field to help people and to improve our community. But that is a reality of law enforcement far too often. And we average about one every couple of years. You know, I went back through 20 years of time, and we've got 10 officer-involved shootings over the last 20 years, ranging from bank robbers to homicide suspects, et cetera. You know, and I don't know what the race of the breakdown is, but, you know, it averages about one every couple of years, and that's been in my 21-year career of this job. And it's the last thing you ever want to do. And not all those shootings were fatal, but, you know, that's where it goes back to, like we talked about earlier. We've been employing best practices for decades. And that's by bringing an outside agency to come in and look at what we do and judge our actions. That case is always presented to the state's attorney's office or whoever he decides to look at it. If he wants to step aside, do a special prosecutor. Again, I'm not here to talk for John today, but John has relayed to us, we've had conversations since Ferguson, and I know any officer-involved death will be referred to a special prosecutor. And I agree with 100%. We have to have that transparency and that complete honesty and picture of what happened to hold people accountable. So what I like about this Police Improvement Act that's going forward, it just reiterated a lot of things we do. It was almost like they walked in and looked at our policy and procedures, to be honest with you. And I'm extremely proud of that fact that we've been doing the right thing for several years. I welcome the scrutiny. We hope there's never another officer-involved shooting, but unfortunately, we know in law enforcement, sometimes that stuff happens. Again, we train our officers in use of force annually. We train it more than annually. We do it at in-service every year. We also do it through roll call training. When we see incidents like this is what we play out for our officers at roll call and talk about what would you have done different? How would you have responded? You know, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. You know, it's a crisis analysis of what happened. What you had in Chicago was a failure of leadership and a failure of an entire system. So again, you know, I think the Police Improvement Act, if you're not familiar with it, will take care of a lot of the situations that occurred in Chicago. You know, departments are going to be mandated to report use of force as far as officer-involved shootings and discharges of their weapons going forward. You can no longer investigate your own. You have to call an outside agency in. There's a lot of good stuff in that law. It wasn't just body cameras. There's a lot of good stuff in that law that I think is going to help build public trust and transparency going forward. But again, I'm proud of the fact that the Springfield Police Department has been doing the right thing for years, and this new law just reiterated it for us.
Mayor?
What's interesting is you brought up an issue that was in all of our ward plans, and that was the importance of the communication. And I think that's what it comes down to, is how we can better communicate with the public on a wide variety of issues. It's just not police related, it's CWLP, it's public works, it's across the board. So that's an area that we're going to work on, but we need public input. So, you know, you had pointed out what we need to do is get as many people involved as possible to help with that process. So you're going to be one I'm going to call, because, you know, as I meet people, you know, I say, oh, they'll be a good fit for this particular issue. And I don't think, some people don't want to be on a committee for months on end. They like to work on a task force or something of that nature. So what we want to do is move in a progressive manner so we address the issues. So we don't come back, like we said earlier, a year from now discussing the same issues. And it might just be having an advisory group or a task group that addresses that particular issue and resolve it. But that's something that's going to be a work in progress moving forward.
Bob Moore?
Our core values determine a lot of things, what we do and how we communicate that. I'm not sure, I haven't seen the website on the cities. I don't know what their 5 top core values are. I really don't. But we need to know. The officers at the bottom of the shelf need to know what the core values of the police department are. In our deadly force policy, the preservation of life must be the highest priority of the police department. And that deadly force, and we haven't seen the deadly force part because it's there, but we just haven't asked to look at it. But it's there. And the chief will come out and explain it to you, step by step. And that's what we need to have. But there's also some things that we have found as we have gone across the state here, my Nova group, we have found out that our citizens simply do not know the law, simply do not know how to act when stopped by the police. These are things that we have found out. We've been to Beardstown, we've been to Cahokia, we've been to East St. Louis, we have been here in Springfield, Bloomington, and the same scenario is that we just don't know our rights, and we give our rights up unnecessarily. Unnecessarily, we give our rights up. So there's some things that our community has got to do, has got to address them own self. We have got to address some of our own issues. We always talk about what the police department can do. I never hear what we can do. We have got to bridge that gap too. So as we move forward, we've got to sit down and say what the police department can do to improve the relationships between the community, and we've got to say what the Afro-American community can do to help to meet in the middle of this road here. Without that, we'll still have a one-sided affair.
And education and communication is going to continue to be important as we move forward. We've been having these meetings. We've always had meetings about what to do when you're pulled over by the police, know your rights, and so on and so forth. But as we're dealing with the new generation and the next generation, we have to go back and re-educate our community, re-educate our family. My 10-year-old granddaughter said, you know, something's up with the po-po. I'm like, who is the po-po? That's what she was calling the police. And then the chief comes over to the house. She says, the chief is here, so she doesn't refer to him as the po-po. But I said, why do you have that attitude or that terminology? And she says, because every time I'm with my dad, he gets stopped. Mama, they said his tail light was out. They said something else was going on, and it wasn't the case. So driving while black is still an issue here in Springfield. So we have to educate our community on how to be respectful when being stopped, and to know your rights, that you don't have to let them search your vehicle. So we continue to give that same message over and over and over. It's just like when a fire breaks out or there's a tornado in the area. You have to keep going through the drills. If you don't continue to do it, you lose it. Anybody else have any questions besides Tom and Calvin? Let's hear from our alderman. Herman, why don't you come on down?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Teresa, thanks for having this forum. But you touched on a very valid point, and so did you, Mr. Moore. We need to teach our young people, instead of teaching them right from wrong, we need to teach them to suspend all belief in right from wrong and teach them how to get to the next second of their life when they get into situations like this, when they're confronted. I do want to give props. I appreciate our Springfield Police Department being here, and I appreciate the work they've been doing in Ward 2, and I appreciate the chief and his community policing policy that he has implemented throughout the ward and throughout the city of Springfield. But for you young men that are here tonight, the most important thing for you all is like Mr. Moore said, is to know what your rights are, know what you can and cannot do. But most of all, remember that that person in front of you is judge, jury, and executioner at this time. So how do I get to the next second in my life? What do I do? Irregardless of what's going on or irregardless of what has happened, when it gets to this point, what do I do so that I can survive this moment, so I can survive this hour, so I can survive this ordeal that I'm in and get to the next seconds of my life? And we fail to realize that we're not teaching that to our kids. We're teaching them right from wrong, and they go out and they act on this right and wrong, and they see these things going on and they can't understand, well, I've been taught right and wrong, but it's not going the way it should be going. So we need to change our conversation that we're having with our young men and our young women. But also, I don't know what else you would want me to say, Teresa. I really wasn't prepared to speak. I was just totally here to monitor the event. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to get up and speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming out. We appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Austin Randolph. One suggestion I would like to make is the commission or review committee or group, when something goes wrong with our officers or anything in city government in the city, a lot of times the public is afraid to come forward. You know, we always hear about whistleblowers. How do we protect those people? What is the city council and the mayor and other entities in the city to help bring about accountability, responsibility, and safety to the people in the community who really need the help? We talk about we want to have an oversight committee, but if the oversight committee doesn't have any teeth, as Mr. Bob Moore always say, we're doing the same thing that they're doing in Chicago. We have to have a mechanism or a system in place so that people feel comfortable coming forward when something goes wrong. I think our city police force and fire force do a real good job, and even our educational system do a wonderful job. But I think we got to connect the dots, because we all know there's always one bad apple in the box. You know, we have PTAs, we have teacher councils, we have parents. We have to find a way for them to come to the forefront and help save the community. That's what I think we need to do, and that's how we need to put it together. Thank you.
Committee. So, but anyway, this might be for the chief. I was with a friend today that had the opposite view of this Van Dyke thing, and she said, either it's a member of her family that's a policeman or she knew one. He said he's afraid to stop anyone now. Is that something it's kind of a backlash, I guess, from that whole,
one thing
in Chicago.
One thing we do in law enforcement is I belong to several peer groups of other chiefs around the state. And one of the things we've heard is since, Ferguson, since Baltimore, is how officers are afraid to engage because they don't want to be the next social media star. They don't want to be on CNN Live. They don't want everything they're doing being judged. So they take the responsibility or the decision to do nothing wrong attitude unless they're dispatched to a call. We haven't seen that here in Springfield. I have talked to some chiefs from around the state, and they're concerned about that. Morale in law enforcement right now is probably about the lowest it's been in several years, because there's a thought process out there that there's no support for law enforcement, which I totally disagree with. We've seen that in our community over and over. There's a lot of support there. It's just kind of the nature we're going through right now. I can't say if it's true or false around the country. I know the president spoke about that at NAACP in Chicago in October, the same thing. There might be some truth to that in some other organizations. We haven't seen it in ours. But I would tell you, anytime a new procedure comes out, a new form or something that the officers don't want to openly accept, every once in a while you'll see a little bit of a slowdown. So if that's happened around the country, it may have been, but we have not witnessed that here.
I just thought I'd bring it up because I was shocked when she said that, really. But because I wouldn't have thought so.
We get into this career to, like I said earlier.
We're talking about the African Americans that are being stopped all the time.
I couldn't hear that last part. I didn't hear your last part.
Well, we're talking about driving while black, but this is the opposite of the white officers are afraid to stop cars. That's what she insinuated, and we didn't go any further in the discussion.
Right.
Yeah, did you get that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. I was just shocked at that, so I thought it's a good place to bring it up.
I've heard that concern. I'm going to tell you right now that part of this Police Improvement Act that goes in effect is what they call pedestrian stop receipts. That'll be going into effect the first of the year. And I know I've talked to several chiefs over the last month or so when we're bouncing ideas of what your receipt's going to look like, what it's going to contain, what's ours going to contain. And, that suspicious person, that getting out with that suspicious person, that person who just doesn't fit in the neighborhood, we're afraid that, and I'm afraid too, I think we'll see a reduction. I think you'll see a reduction in officers getting out because they don't know what to expect yet. But once you get some time passed and they get comfortable, that'll come back. Who's to say, we're going to obviously try to motivate our officers, keep them motivated to do the right thing, and I believe we have professional police officers that a little piece of paper and a receipt's not going to stop them from doing their job, and I don't anticipate to be a problem here. But I do think that, if you look around the state when it's said and done next year, I would not be surprised if there's a reduction, and I think Northwestern University is going to study that, and when they do, I think you'll see a reduction overall because it's another thing that you have to do to officers. So it's just another process and a policy they have to fulfill. But I believe we've got professional officers in our department, and they're not going to allow that to slow them down or stop them.
Thank you. Hey, Ed, you want to go ahead and come up?
Hi, I'm Ed Wojcicki from the Illinois Police Chiefs Association. To the issue of body cameras, that was our #1 issue in the legislature this year and last year. We were with you on that, and we were really pleased to see that the legislature passed something that allows for the use of body cameras. Unfortunately, as we've talked about, it's a bad law. And so we would appreciate your help in this next session to tame some of the things down that would actually make it do what the citizens and the police actually want to do. I was in on a lot of those meetings where that sausage was being made, and we actually had the unions with us. We had the sheriffs, the state police, the chiefs, the police unions. We're all on the same side on this, and we think we could make it better, and we'd like to have your help on that. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question.
I have a question for the officer wearing the body camera. Can you tell us how that feels for you and what your experience has been, please?
Good evening, ma'am.
Chief told me to do that.
I'm Deputy Chief Stokes with the Springfield Police Department. I'm kind of modeling the camera tonight, but I had a lot to do with the officers that are wearing them, and I've talked to them, and we've been evaluating the process for the last 5 weeks. And to a man and a woman that's testing it, there were 6 officers and 2 sergeants that agreed to test these cameras. The overall feeling is it's very positive, and more officers are excited to wear them and to get them than any. I haven't heard any complaints. So the evaluations that I've been getting in are all positive. The minor things at the beginning of the program were how to best wear them, how to best get the best picture. But as far as the officers wanting to wear them, I think that's out there. It's captured some moments where citizens have made false complaints against officers. And so the positives for law enforcement and the citizens, we all see it, we all know it's out there, and it's just something that we hope works well for us going forward in the future as well. So,
thank you. You wear that well.
Thanks.
To go with that, there's never been a initiative so big in my career. So going forward with this, we have to get it right. You get one opportunity to implement this and do it right, and that's what we plan to do. And again, we embrace the technology. As Ed said, obviously there's some changes that we would like to see to help make this easier. But as far as the officers want them. There's questions, there's concerns, but we've been able to work through that through our policy development by inviting them into the process to help develop the policy. But we're still waiting, when this finally goes through, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board is still supposed to put out some additional guidelines to help craft policy. We crafted our policy around the law and best practice throughout the country. We talked to several different organizations around the country to adopt what was best and what worked for them. There's nothing we cannot overcome in this law. There's nothing here. There's very seldom, I should say, a time, I shouldn't be so negative, I guess, that the community and law enforcement want the same thing. I think that pressure, that cooperation will get this done for us.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and be a part of this conversation. I have to go pick up my daughter, who can't drive yet, but we're almost there. But one thing that I know, the continued conversation with our SRO officers as we move forward with this process is going to be important as well, because they too will be wearing the body cameras and have those in our schools. So we'll need to talk, and our off-duty officers that might be wearing them. So we'll need to continue our process and protocols, but we are very aware that keeping our schools safe is important, but more importantly, having that connection with the community, because it's the community issues that we're dealing with, and making sure we have those open conversations and making school a safe place for students. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I look forward to our continued conversations. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for your leadership. Yes, sir, at the mic.
My name is Marcus Lucas. And question, Chief, I know we've probably discussed this many a time before, but how many complaints have come through to Springfield Police Department?
This year, we are having an extremely good year. I want to say we're somewhere around 10. It's the lowest I've ever seen. I think that goes back to our community outreach, our community engagement, explaining to people what we do and why we do it. Now, we get calls all the time about situations and informal inquiries that a lot of times we can sit down, discuss with them, explain to them why things were done and why it occurred, and people will see that, oh, you know what, my perception was different, and there's not a violation of our policy procedure that equals a complaint. Typically, I'd say we average, I'd have to go back and look, I don't have those numbers, but somewhere around 25 a year on average, probably.
And I got to apologize because it's more of a pimped question, because we've had, as Bob said, we've had these discussions around the state, and there's always a crowd in the audience that want to talk about everything negative that have happened with them in law enforcement. And usually our first question comes up is, how many of you have filed a complaint? And I say that because this is something we've been preaching. If everybody is mad, upset at the police department, we need to document it. And in our profession, and I apologize, those who don't know, I'm a retired Illinois State police officer. In our profession, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So we've got to document it, we've got to write it. If we truly are concerned, write it down. And there's enough avenues out here that will allow people to review and maybe go over what you have to say. And one of the things also been talked about is all these new laws. There are avenues out here that explain the new laws. The internet, ILCS, you can find every law out here. I've talked about the new receipt policy, I've talked about the new body cams, I've talked about the investigations, but if you also need to know, Illinois General Assembly has a website. Every law is covered. So thank you for your answer, but again, reiterate, we have to document. We have to write. And so that's my pitch for Noble, and come out to one of us when we're talking, and there's other organizations besides Noble that are giving out this free information.
Thank you, Marcus.
To build on what Marcus said, we put our complaint process, it's online. It explains what you need to do to file a complaint or a compliment for an officer. We want to hold our officers accountable. Probably the most active complaint we get is when somebody's been arrested and they think it's going to help their case and they want to try their criminal case at IA, and that's not the process for IA. And so, or they want to come plead why they shouldn't got a ticket. That's not an IA complaint. That's a court issue. That's something that a judge decides. So those are typically what we get. I look forward to the day, and I don't think we'll ever see it, but because we're not perfect, but I would love to see a day where there are no formal complaints. And I think if we continue our efforts as a police department, being a professional police department, we'll continue to do better and better, and that's what we strive to do. Because the bottom line is, we're providing a service. And if we're not providing a service to our customers, which is the city and the community and the residents, that they're happy with, then we got to look at ourselves and figure out what we can do better. So that's what we're striving to do. So again, not perfect, but we're striving to do better.
And in terms of the NAACP, we tell our people who call us in with complaints and concerns, if you didn't document, it didn't happen. And then they'll call us and say, well, you're not doing anything, and we'll send them the complaint form. We cannot speak on behalf of individuals if they don't sign that authorization form for us to do so. The other complaint and concern that they would have with Springfield Police Department is they would go down there and simply feel intimidated. There are a lot of people who don't have good writing skills, just like going to parent-teacher conferences. Sometimes somebody needs someone to go with them to make them feel comfortable and give them the confidence to follow through. But we do receive a lot of complaint calls. We average about 47 to 60 calls per month on various issues, but a lot of them has to do with the police department or the sheriff department or being held and mistreated in jail. So we asked them to sign that consent so we can investigate it. We have a real close relationship with West Bar as well as Chief Winslow here. And we have people who will investigate for us and come back and say, you all want to follow up and look into this a little more, or they'll say, he doesn't have a leg to stand on, or she doesn't have a leg to stand on. And then when you show them the tape, they back off. So it speaks for itself. Bob Moore.
Yes. As I talked about the responsibility of the citizens to know the law, but also need to talk about the police officers having respect when people don't know the law. Don't misuse the law because people are ignorant of the law. Don't do that. And we know that happens. We know that happens. And we also have to be cognizant of the fact of what causes bad police-community relations. What causes bad police-community relations? And if I were to ask the audience to name 3 things that would help improve the community relation right here in Springfield, what would you say? What would be the number 1? If I were to ask you that question now, what top 3 things would you tell us, tell the chief that he needs to do, and tell the community, both sides, tell the community what we need to do to each other to improve the community relations? 3 things. Who wants to give the first one? Aha, come on, young man.
How you doing? I'm a freshman student at University of Springfield, Illinois. First of all, I want to thank Justin Rose for giving me this opportunity to be here. And definitely for you guys giving me the opportunity to speak here. As far as something that will, as far as improve the relations for the community, as far as being from Chicago, we understand that officers can intimidate the youth. You know, I've been pulled over before, and before even getting pulled over, I feel the officers predetermine how they're going to treat me or how they're approaching me, as far as that you automatically did a crime before they even get a chance to see what you've done. You know, I've experienced having to use my knowledge on the law when the officer asked me to get out the car, and I said, you know, do you have a warrant for that? And then, you know, they come back and make up something and say that your back brake light is off or something, you know, some crazy stuff like that. But I feel the police just need to get in the community more, you know, and let people know that they really care genuinely, and just let people know that, you know, they're here to protect and serve you and not to, you know, strike fear in your hearts. I think that's the first and foremost thing that you have to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's 8 o'clock according to Verizon, so let's start with Justin. Let's have closing comments.
I guess my closing comments fall right in line with what Josh said. We have to do a better job of educating instead of organizing and managing on all levels. Actually get out there in the community, do different beats, walk beats, bike beats, different things to make sure that civilians and, you know, the public understands that trust can be built, and vice versa. Like Bob Moore said, we have a right as civilians to purport ourselves in a manner that shows that we're more than what the bad news travels, the bad news that's been traveling about underrepresented population. So I think it's twofold. I think both open lines of communication, but we both have a responsibility in this thing to fix community policing and law enforcement.
Thank you. Bob?
Until we get the police to treat us like we think we need to be treated, we can do something our own self. And that's what we're doing right now. We're dealing with 10 best rules of dealing with the police. We're training, we're occurring across the southern part of the state. We just had PBS do a television program with us on 10 rules of dealing with the police. Simply that we trying to teach people how to act, teach them how the law works. And there are just so many things. If I can just go back and start with Ferguson. If Michael Brown had simply gotten out of the street, would he have been alive today? I don't know. If he had not been accused of hitting that officer, would he have been alive today? I don't know. But he wouldn't have pushed it up to a felony. It wouldn't have got up to a felony where the officer could justifiably take his life. So there are some things that we must do as a community until the system corrects itself. And the system is correcting itself right now. It's unfortunate that police chiefs have to pay the price. It's unfortunate that we all that are served in these positions, we know what that cost is. We go to bed at night, this chief goes to bed at night, I went to bed at night, didn't know what I was going to wake up to the next morning. Because we have so many officers out there that have discretion. But ultimate responsibility comes back to us. Comes back to us. So, until we get the system corrected, take care of yourself. Do what you can do to make sure that you don't have a confrontation with the police.
Chief?
First off, again, I want to thank everybody for inviting us tonight, and I thank everybody who came out. As the young man stated, he made some very good points. I think the question was something to the effect, what can we do to improve police-community relations? And I think if you look at it, it's the same thing on each side. First and foremost, respect. Second, active listening skills. The Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That goes for police and the citizens. 3, Bob just kind of hit on it, educating yourself on your rights. If somebody would have told me 10 years ago that I was going to sit on a panel with Bob Moore to educate people about their rights, I'm thinking as a police officer, well, they should know their own rights. They should take the active interest. I would have never thought that. But, it's something that's needed, and we've been doing it for over a year now. 4, it's something I challenge my officers to, and it sounds goofy as heck, but it's called positive impact through positive contact. And it goes exactly to the heart of that man. We all get nervous when the police light you up or stop you behind you. We all do. I did as a young man. Everybody does. As an adult even. Your heart kind of stops, kind of sinks. But this man has a fear, is what he talks about. A fear. And that's what we can't have. I've had people stop from certain parts of the country that when I stopped them, I can tell when I walk up to the car where they're from by their actions. I can tell when they step out the car and where they put their hands, where they're from. That's what we can't have, is that fear. And how do we create that? How do we get over that fear? Like he said, getting out in the community, showing people you care and showing them who you are, and that's what we've been trying to do. But it goes back to, like I said a minute ago, a little thing we call positive impact through positive contact. And that's each day challenge our officers to make 3 non-enforcement related contacts per day. 3, I don't care if it's in a gas station while you're getting a drink. I don't care if you see a guy working in his yard and you get out of the car and you get out and talk to him. I don't care if it's stopping and shooting a couple of hoops with some guys playing some 3-on-3 basketball on the road or the sidewalk, I should say, or the parking lot. Yeah. But it's about letting people see you as a person. And that's what we have to continue to do. Something that simple on both sides, the police officers, but also as a community. Think about it. What if everybody in this room did that? I don't know what could happen. I don't know, maybe you get to know your neighbors. Maybe you can make a friend. Think about the impact it could have on race relations in our community. I don't know what the outcome could be, but you know what? You can't have good relationships without trust. And if you've had a positive contact with somebody, it's a lot harder not to like them. So it opens the door for constructive conversations that can lead to relationships that ultimately that I hope will lead to driving down crime in our community. So, you know, those are simple things that we can all do. But again, I want to thank everybody for having us out tonight.
Continue to have these discussions and that open dialogue. We want people to come out, feel comfortable, feel safe, be open and honest. If you see something, say something. Nothing's going to change if you go home and you keep it inside and you're afraid to walk outside of your neighborhood. At this point, I would like to invite you all to join the NAACP. We are the oldest, the boldest, the most loved, and the most hated civil rights organization in the world. The NAACP started because of the 1908 race riots right here in our hometown, Springfield, Illinois. We have a lot of work to do, but we have a lot to be proud of. And at this time, I want to acknowledge my first Vice President, Kathy Davis. Can you please stand? Let's give Kathy a hand. Thank you for what you do. My IT person, James Bass, back there with the camera. Let's give him a hand. And we have a couple of our board committee members here, Austin Randolph and Bab Dickerman. Am I missing anyone? Judy Johnson was here earlier. Bob Moore is the new chair. Let's give him a hand for what he's going to do and what he continues to do. But thank you all again so much for coming out. Our banquet is in February. It's our 95th annual banquet. We're going to be talking about encouraging our youth and honoring our veterans. So encouraging our youth as we continue this fight, as we continue to break down the barriers, destroy the myths and the stereotypes, and work together is very important for us to continue to grow in the Springfield community. But honoring our veterans, those who went to war and didn't want to go to war, those who lost limbs, we have to let them know that we love them, that we appreciate them, and we're here to serve them as well because they are a part of our community. And when you see a veteran, especially a homeless veteran, shake his or her hand. Let them know that you appreciate them for what they do. And we appreciate you all tonight. Have a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you all so much.